Then it occurred to them, after they had seen the signs, to imprison him for a time. The Quran, chapter 12, verse 35. In Singapore, in the back of Zaki's grab car, my mind raced. I had spent all day in that cafe, analyzing the state of play, contemplating Jasmine Lau's crafty words wrapped in her unveiled propositioning. The crisscross of events in the previous 24 hours unsettled me, but I was now used to feeling upside down since the days that Agent Dunn told me I'd be placed on administrative leave a year prior. We were minutes from Zaki's place when he turned up the radio as a newscaster announced breaking news. Earlier today in Basel, Switzerland, the world's central bank officials met at the Bank for International Settlements and unveiled an emergency plan to fix the global economy in the midst of the mounting Code 51 crisis. Under the coordination of the BIS, the majority of central banks have agreed to implement an alternative monetary system based on an international digital currency. It's called the Reserve Zenith Quantity, or RZQ. This new system will be accepted as legal tender for domestic and foreign transactions and will rely on new blockchain infrastructure that is not subject to the vulnerabilities of conventional payment networks. The RZQ was developed by a consortium of Asian and African nations that have been experimenting with central bank digital currencies during the past year. Although the United States and a few other nations dissented against the RZQ currency proposal, experts say there is little they can do to stop it. RZQ will be available for anyone to use simply by downloading an RZQ wallet, available for free on the internet. And with no reliable way to spend money in the traditional payment system, this new digital currency may be just what the world needs. Yikes, I blurted out. Zaki's curious eyes shot at me through his rearview mirror. I leaned back in the seat. The news announcement was like a curtain lifting, a stage play revealed with me watching front and center. The characters were clear. The Nigerian officials at the central bank and Oyo's Financial Crime Investigation Division, but they were not the only ones. They probably were not the main ones, I thought. This is bigger than Nigeria, bigger than Europe. My partners are at a higher level, George Okoye told me on the private jet. He, Oyo, Harold Smith, and Firewater were only pieces to the jigsaw. Many pieces were still missing. My hunch? Jasmine Lau was connected to all of it. I couldn't ignore her, though I tried. My aversion to any further engagement came from my sense as an intelligence professional and as a man of faith. My fidelity at stake in more ways than one. More contact with her could be playing with fire, but she seemed to be the source of data that needed to be collected. I reached in my pocket and pulled out the cards she gave me. Zaki, change of plans. Turn the car around. Take me back to the hotel. Soon the sun set. Zaki pulled up as close as he could to the Marina Bay Sands. I went in through the side door with a swipe of Jasmine's key card. The back of her business card read 1940. I entered the elevator and pushed for the 19th floor. Moments later, the doors opened to a long hallway, bright and beige, pairs of doors orderly spaced. The sign on the corridor reading rooms 1920 to 1945 pointed me forward. The rooms were huge, judging by the space between them as I walked, glancing at doors on the right side of the hall. Room 1920. Room 1922. I looked and listened, observing everything passing before my eyes and ears as I scanned. Nothing out of the ordinary, it seemed. 1930. I kept moving. Then, a door up ahead popped open on the left side. An elderly Asian couple emerged, a man and a woman bickering. I stepped back a bit and lingered around door 1933 and pulled out my phone, focusing on a make-believe text. The couple approached, so engrossed in their argument that they paid me no mind. As they passed, the man told the woman, "What was it? I don't remember." And the woman said, "How do you not remember? We ate it at our anniversary dinner." They entered the elevator, engrossed in their argument. Relieved, I stuck my phone into my pocket and followed along the doors on the right side toward Jasmine's room. 1934, 1936. I thought about all the data I was collecting in my surroundings. I noticed 1938 had one of its numbers loose. The 8 had partially unstuck and was dangling upside down below the other numbers. The number 8, I thought. Then the words echoed. "I don't remember," that the couple said. "How do you not remember?" Remembering. We ate it at our anniversary. Anniversary, I thought. 1938. I was close, but something struck me about that room. 1938. What was I doing here in Singapore, in this hotel? How had I gotten myself wrapped up in all this? I was far from my days in Detroit, from my time at MIT, from my professional performance awards at the CIA. How did things unravel? I had to hold it together. Like when I made the deepest prayer I ever made after reciting that chapter in the Quran entitled The Defrauders. Your name is recorded in Sijin. Now what did Jasmine say earlier that day, I thought? Fraudsters. I froze. I looked at the door again with the 8 dangling. 1938? Benford's Law? No, the 8 was out of place. We ate it. What about 8-3? I pulled out my phone and launched a Quran app. I spun through the table of contents. Al-Mutaffifin, the Defrauders, Chapter 83. I looked at the door. 1938. But what happened in 1983? Anniversary. I stood there, still lost in thought. My CIA life flashed before my eyes, and every intelligence experience and insight I had simply collapsed and fell away, except one. A singular data point stood bare. 1983. How could I have missed it? This was the key. I turned around, away from room 1940. I proceeded to the elevator, got on, and quickly pressed PH to go up. I stood in the middle of the box. The elevator doors started closing. The room at the end of the hall opened up on the right side. 1940. Out popped Jasmine Lau in a red silk robe, loose, with a strap dangling. She looked towards me, and the elevator doors shut.
Meanwhile, on a private jet over the Atlantic, the Federal Reserve Chairman's assistant was next to him as he pressed Join Meeting on the Civets browser on his laptop. As soon as he connected, he heard,
"What the hell?"
from the National Security Advisor.
"Explain to me what just happened. What is this RZQ crap?"
"We were blindsided," the Fed chairman said apologetically.
"I don't want to hear excuses or reasons,"
the National Security Advisor said.
"I want to know what we're going to do. The president is having a press conference in an hour. We need to know how to handle this."
"Yes, since the BIS made this move, my team has been looking at our options," the Fed chairman explained. "We've even run some by the BIS Technological Innovation Committee before we boarded the plane back home."
"And?"
The National Security Advisor's brow furrowed and eyes pierced the camera. "Well, our initial reaction was to propose that the world move forward with this international digital currency idea, but that it be based off of a protocol that is developed jointly, with strong U.S. support and security standards. This idea was rejected. Apparently, a numerical majority of central banks are taking the position that they will not use any currency connected to U.S. infrastructure. This is the view of the BIS. Unfortunately, we don't have the influence over it like we do with the IMF or even the UN.
But how could this be? Asked the National Security Advisor.
Our economy is the most important in the world and the most stable. If we don't participate in this new protocol they're using, how could it be worth anything? Well, the thing is, you're right. In a normal situation, there would be no way countries could turn away from US-based financial infrastructure. But our payment system is in question. Countries have been holding dollars, but are now not so sure it will ever regain its value. So when China decided to get behind the RZQ currency and honor it for global trade, most countries calculated that this was their quick ticket out of the crisis. It would allow them to trade with the world's largest exporter of goods, China. Even our allies, they might be suspicious of the Chinese Communist Party, but with the riots happening, they cave pretty easily. Each government is also now ordering new regulations to prohibit any other digital currency besides the reserve zenith quantity. They're even banning Bitcoin transactions, trying to prevent all cryptocurrency competition. So, what are our options?
The National Security Advisor asked. The Fed chairman looked at his assistant. A bump of turbulence rattled them both, and the video stream froze momentarily and buffered. It reconnected.
Well, our back is really against the wall, he said. I see two possibilities. Embrace this new currency system and figure out a way to gain some influence, some control over it, or figure out a way to break it. Yes, but if we break it, what do we reproduce in its place?
The National Security Advisor asked.
Well, with all due respect, the Fed chairman said, I refuse to believe the days of dollar dominance are over. We just need time to put things back together again.
Precisely, the National Security Advisor said. That's just what we need. Time. And it's just what we don't have. The president is going in front of the American people at the top of the hour. I've heard all I need to hear. Have a safe flight back. And well, watch out for the crowds at Dulles Airport. Reports are that any private plane that lands in Washington is getting tracked by plane spotters. They're taking photos of anyone that exits and are posting them on social media. The hashtag is Code 51 Culprits. Be careful, Chairman. Situation room out. The screen went blank. The Fed chairman and his assistant stared at each other, their mouths agape. They uttered little as they felt there was nothing productive to say. They each sat back and peered through the windows on opposite sides of the plane. The jet streaked westward, high over the ocean's middle, in the clouds, in momentary peace above the chaos encircling the world below.
It was odd. Back at the Marina Bay Sands, the casino deck was just as lively as it was the last time I was there. No slot machine was unattended. Every blackjack table was crowded. It was as if the Code 51 crisis was not happening there. I strolled through the aisles. The rings and chimes bounced all around me. The casino floor seemed to pulsate, a coral reef of anxious life, varied bodies transfixed on the colorful palettes of chance, anticipating the taste of bounty, fearing the touch of loss. Funny though, everything counting as money on those tables or in those machines was not real money, but a token, a chip, or a ticket. Everything represented value. This wasn't the real world of money, but a walled garden of gambling. The people there already had their money in tokens and would receive their winnings in tokens, so the games could operate uninterrupted despite how broken real-world money had become. In fact, the collapse of the real money system probably made these folks want the tokens more. If your bank account was worthless, maybe holding casino tokens made sense. To the addict, at least. The posture of those pulling the slot machine levers was familiar, hunched over like Lucky Time boys in Kano. I looked at those slot machines and inched up closely behind one patron plane who paid me no attention. I circled around the machine to view its back, where a small panel of writing was located. I leaned over and was not surprised at the inscription, Firewater Technologies Limited. It was not a discovery, but a confirmation. Firewater was connected to online gambling sites, so it made sense they'd produce physical slot machines. The puzzle pieces were getting clearer. I knew what needed to be done. I settled over at one of the booths and began texting. I have some sorrel punch and would like to barter for your sorghum. Still available? I pressed send. The response came. What is the award for? An award for ants, I replied. Several seconds later, the message came in. How much is needed? 100 million seeds, I texted back. That's all? Yes, for now, I replied. Where to send? Hold for a few minutes. We'll text wallet address. I typed in a number to the phone. Soon a woman answered. Washington, D.C. Urban Prep Academy, the receptionist said. Hi, could you connect me to Mr. Lee? I asked. The assistant principal is very busy. What is this concerning? Well, tell him this is Mr. Futon Bottom. The woman seemed to be in a rush and put me on hold. The line was quiet. And then, Jabbari, Jimmy said, understanding my code. Yes, sirree, I confirmed. Hey, Jimmy, I know you have lots of questions, but I don't have much time. Just tell me, have you gotten one of those RZQ wallets yet? No, is that what the president was just talking about? That everybody's got to get on the Zenith Reserve something or other? You know I'm not into all that fancy tech stuff, but my students are all into it. DeAndre, right here in my office, just about to give him detention for hooking up a cryptocurrency mining hardware into the school IT room. He got caught unplugging it this morning, said his Bitcoin is worthless, that they're banning all other tokens. Jimmy, tell me, how much do you trust that kid? I asked, 'cause he might be able to help offset this catastrophe. I gave Jimmy a few more details, but the bottom line was up front. I needed DeAndre's RZQ wallet address, and then he needed to share his private key with me. Jimmy paused a few seconds. So, DeAndre, I heard Jimmy say, you still want that letter of recommendation for your application to MIT? I heard DeAndre give an emphatic yes. So here's the deal, Jimmy began to explain. Within a minute, Jimmy gave me DeAndre's public RZQ wallet address and the private key. Quickly, I typed the public address into my phone and forwarded it to my, sorghum supplier. Then I got a reply. Got it, sending now. I closed the phone. I walked up through the dinner table booths, past the blackjack tables and slot machines, all still bustling as people pulled levers, threw dice, and prayed for more tokens. The frantic energy was thick, but I was calm. I hopped on the elevator and pressed L. Seconds later, the doors opened onto the lobby, packed with guests, laden with bags in the checkout line. A queue spiraled way beyond the front desk. I kept moving to the automatic doors at the exit. I reached into my pocket and pulled out 2 items, Jasmine Lau's business card and the key to her room. I dropped them both in a trash bin at the door and walked out. Then I called Zachy for pickup. When he arrived, he asked for the destination as I dove into his vehicle. Napier Road, I told him. The U.S. Embassy. We need to get there fast. Inshallah, Zachy replied, shifting into drive and speeding away from the hotel.
At Washington Dulles International Airport, the Fed chairman and his assistant held up their jackets high over their heads as they gingerly descended the drenched stairs onto the tarmac. They had no umbrellas. But the rain was welcomed because it's probably what kept the Code 51 protesters from gathering outside the Dulles Airport fence. The two central bank officials were soaked when they entered the private jet terminal. Walking through the VIP customs line was a breeze, even more than usual for these frequent global entry travelers. But moving past the security area, they noticed a crowd in the ticket area, too preoccupied to notice these two officials who had literally and figuratively been in the eye of the storm. It was odd for the private jet terminal to have a mass of passengers waiting for so long. These folks were noticeably perturbed, faces gloomy, and not just because of the weather. The Fed chairman and his assistant moved slowly toward the terminal exit, watching an exchange heating between a tall man in his 60s with two large suitcases and not holding back his annoyance with the ticketing agent. The older man looked as if he had just left his favorite upscale sporting gear store, donning freshly purchased attire. He wore a fashionable, high-end tracksuit and white tennis shoes with no scuffs, noticeably casual wear for the wealthy. With him were his wife and 2 generations of family, their children with spouses and some grandchildren, almost everyone with AirPods and devices at the ready. And they all had large bags to be checked. "We've downloaded the app," the country club-looking man said through gritted teeth. "But it only comes with a tiny amount of those RZQ things. Surely you must take what we have. We've been Gold Star members of this charter plane service for 20 years. But the attendant kept apologizing, explaining that she could do nothing about the price of the ticket, and the airline had instructed them to no longer accept dollars. Even combined, the elite clan did not have enough RZQ to get even one ticket. The private group chartered flight to the island of St. Bart's would be taking off soon. The airline attendant politely motioned the family to clear the ticket area, and as they did, another couple strolled up into the boarding area, also wheeling luggage, but only carry-on. They had the features of West Africans, discernible even through their large sunglasses. The man wore a traditional Nigerian multicolored square cap. Their coats were long and luxurious, the woman's with fur around the collar. Her gold earrings dangled noticeably even in her nonchalant gait. The man pulled out his phone. 2 tickets, please, for St. Bart's, the man requested. How much is the fare? The ticket agent replied it was 100 RZQ. The man scanned his phone, and within seconds, the agent pointed them to the security gate. The jumpsuit gentleman steamed, turning to his wife, asking, "Where in the world did they get all of that currency when we can't acquire 1 full RZQ with all the BIS download restrictions?" The African couple turned around before going to the tarmac. They wanted to take a selfie right at the gate. They smiled brightly. After snapping it, the woman said, "This is for the fast leg, dear. Let's take one when we get to the islands, one in Dubai and one in Hong Kong." Woman, you on your Instagram, the man said. "My little hush puppy." They chuckled and walked to the plane. The jumpsuit man watched with envy and turned his head to the other side of the terminal where the 2 Fed officials were leaving. He stood up. "Hey, isn't that the Federal Reserve chairman?" he said, his voice brewing with distaste. "Hey, you, get back here! Get back here! You owe us all an explanation. We're not going for this." But the Federal Reserve chairman and his assistant did not acknowledge the shouts. They kept their heads forward and hopped into a black government sedan.
Zaki's car radio stayed on the news, or talk of the news. There was no longer light entertainment emanating from people's speakers and screens. The whole world was focused on economic events, because events were spiraling quickly. 2 Singaporean commentators opined on the latest happenings. "This new digital currency is supposed to be a solution, but I don't know if it can work," a male commentator said. With only 1.4 billion reserve Zenith quantity tokens in existence, how are people going to acquire it? Well, they say BIS is providing the digital coins to people once they download the wallet, a female commentator responded. It's not like the dollar. You can spend 0.00001 RZQs, so they're only allowing people to download a fraction of a token. From there, they hope people will begin spending again. Within minutes, we were in front of the U.S. Embassy. Security was at a high level, per usual. I got out and went to the security gate kiosk manned by Marines. One stood up, firm. All external appointments have been canceled. No services are taking place indefinitely, the Marine said. My name's Jabbari Lincoln. I should be in the Scattered Castles database. I have critical information about the Code 51 crisis. The Marine squinted at me and then turned to the other guards. My mention of the intelligence community's personal security database, Scattered Castles, let him know I should not be dismissed. He typed into a keyboard, eyes fixed on his computer monitor. Two other guards hovered behind him to watch the screen. The first Marine looked back up at me. Sir, please stay where you are. The others put their hands on their sides over the butts of their pistols while he faded back and picked up a red phone on the desk behind him. The guards kept their eyes on me. The first Marine hung up the phone and then said, We'll take you to the regional security officer. The RSO's fine, but I really need to speak to the Treasury attaché, I told him. The RSO will take care of you, the Marine said. Beads of sweat had collected on his brow. I put my phone through the X-ray machine conveyor belt and walked through the metal detector. The two other Marines formed on my opposite sides and walked me to the embassy main entrance. As we left the guard station, I noticed the first Marine get back on that red phone, talking into it while looking away from me. Moments later, I sat in a windowless room with a table and a few chairs. Two men entered, wearing button-down blue dress shirts with no ties. One tall, thick like a former football player in his late 50s. The other was medium-sized, in his 40s and bookish with glasses. The tall one spoke first. Jabbari, my name's Bob. I'm the RSO, he said. This here is the Treasury attaché, Bill Warner. We're glad you finally decided to turn yourself in. We're here to take your statement. That's not why I'm here. I've got something that is of interest to the U.S. government, I said. What's that? Bob asked. The Treasury attaché stayed silent, observing. Information on who is ultimately behind this crisis and a way to navigate out of it, I told him. Jabbari, we already know about the Nigerian cyber sabotage, the RSO said. The USG is aware that Nigerian fingerprints are all over this, and we figured out they're working with other countries to push this new currency plan, and we know you're involved with them. So if you're saying you want to tell us the names of your accomplices, we're listening. He took out a notepad and pen. This didn't start with Nigeria, I said. I'll explain more, but there's something important. First, I need to show you something. On my phone. I opened up my mobile and swiped up an app. Here's an RZQ wallet that I have access to. I laid it flat on the table, screen up. The two men's eyes widened. The Treasury attaché picked up the phone to examine. 100 million RZQ tokens? How is this possible? The Treasury attaché said, speaking for the first time. Why, that's gotta be a fake. Impossible, Bob, the RSO said. You can only download 1/2 a token. Only the BIS has direct access to this quantity. The Treasury attaché looked more closely, swiping the app. No, I think this is real, he said. Bob, right now, 1 RZQ token has the purchasing power of what $1,000 used to buy. They gazed at each other, doing the mental math. Here, let me prove this is real, I said, pulling my phone away from him. So, Bill, I'm sure you've got your own wallet by now. I'll send you a test transaction right this second. Let me see your QR code. He got his phone, unlocked it quickly, and reached it out to me, his mouth pursed with anticipation. I tapped a few notes on my keypad and faced my phone to his screen, scanning the QR code. The phones beeped. I just sent you 0.2 RZQs, doubled your money. Labeled it as a charitable donation. The Treasury Attaché's balance had increased to 0.4 RZQs. I showed them both my screen. The balance read 99,999,999.8 RZQ. Gentlemen, I don't need this value. I'm happy to donate it to businesses to stimulate the economy, but there's more to this protocol. That's what financial authorities need to know. The people who have proposed this RZQ system are focusing on what they call the reserve zenith quantity. It's a provision of funds, but it won't have the stimulating economic effect without another underlying algorithm. The value is not in the provision, but the reward. What do you mean? The Treasury Attaché asked. Like gamification? Yes, the gamification element is connected to the RZQ spending. Your RZQ balance can increase, but only in 3 ways. Someone giving it to you charitably, by generating it through economic activity, or by stealing it from someone by getting access to their private key. The BIS is only dealing with the provision part of the protocol. The app I downloaded holds RZQs, but also something called AJRs, rewards. They've ignored the reward algorithm. So any nation dealing with the spending of provision without understanding the reward algorithm won't generate much long-term growth. There's an international economic race that is kicked off, and the US is at a disadvantage. I can share how the reward algorithm works. Treasury, the Fed, everyone who's looking after US financial stability. Otherwise, the US is going to end up like Nigeria's economy within months. I've seen that state, and it ain't pretty. Wherever I can spend RZQ to help stave off the collapse of the world economy, I'll do it. The protocol, if used right, can help. I'm afraid that those who seem to have most control of the RZQs are going to use it to destroy. And I've seen their destruction. Now, what makes you think the US government won't just take this RZQ from you? The RSO asked. You can take my phone. You can access my app. But the private key to this wallet is in my head. You can't access the funds without it. All this provision is lost if you don't have me to spend it for you. I'd like to be put on a plane back to Washington ASAP. Jabbari, we know you had problems with your employer, but you're still CIA, right? The RSO said. Why did you not want to talk to the chief of station here about all this and try to negotiate with him? I'm a lifelong State Department officer. Why'd you ask to speak to the embassy's treasury rep? Because the CIA has been infiltrated by Chinese intelligence, I said. The RSO scoffed. Infiltrated? Infiltrated how? The Treasury Attaché looked even more intently at me. Everything you're seeing right now with the Code 51 crisis has been years in the making, I explained. Our financial intel warning system has been blindsided. Not because there weren't signs of this all along, but because the intelligence community has been operating with one hand tied behind its back. China's Ministry of State Security has penetrated the CIA's Security Directorate. It's probably been a dream of theirs. The MSS has prioritized countering U.S. intel ever since its official formation in 1983. My thoughts trailed off, remembering my analyst training class project. What proof do you have of this? The RSO asked. I can tell you how to find the proof. You can start with a Scattered Castles database software that you use to look up my security clearances. Any software the intelligence community personnel security components are using has probably been corrupted. Somewhere in the supply chain, maybe 2 or 3 hops removed from whatever US company that provided that software, you'll find a chip or some other hardware component sourced to Portugal. Portugal? What does Portugal have to do with Chinese intelligence? The Treasury Attaché asked. Because there's part of China that was a former Portuguese colony, Macau, I told them. Like Hong Kong, it was handed back over to China in the late 1990s. It's a wealthy city, mostly from the casino and gambling industry. But gambling is illegal in China, the RSO said. Yes, but China allows it in Macau, I shot back. Even places that ban gambling find ways to benefit from it. Look, there's a company called Firewater Technologies Limited. It's a typical shell company connected to gambling manufacturing, registered in the BVI. No apparent connection to China. But I spent a summer in Brazil in undergrad. They used to have this whiskey drink called aguardente. Literally, it means burning water in Portuguese. It was popular among the locals. I knew there was something familiar about that name, something Portuguese about the term. Macau has been a key driver in the global expansion of the gambling industry. China bans gambling, but you better believe some of that casino money makes its way to members of the Chinese Communist Party. But why do you say this has been in the works for years? The Treasury attaché asked. Well, my own background investigation hit a snag after I made a donation to an organization supporting Uyghur refugees. And as I thought about all the times, even my own analysis was rebuffed by some within my management chain when my analytic line pointed to a different direction. Like when I wouldn't go along with the assumption that North Korea was behind the hack. I think I was knocking on the door of unearthing Chinese intel's hands on cyber hacking. I was placed on administrative leave right around that time. Who else do you think knows about this in the agency? The RSO asked. Well, I don't know for sure. I think others had their suspicions, I said. I know that someone on the inside was trying to warn me that Chinese intel was involved with my suspension, but that person must have been watched like a hawk. He or she went on radio silence as soon as I was blacklisted, I think. The Treasury attaché took a deep breath. His eyes darted back and forth, processing. Jabbari, if what you're telling us is true, he said, if you can navigate this digital currency protocol to revive the economy, if have actual knowledge of a breach of the CIA security directorate, that would make you, well, not a traitor. But can you name names? Can you specify what Chinese operatives are involved in any of this? I have one name, most likely an alias, I said. Jasmine Lau. Her cover is a financial consultant in Hong Kong. I think she's aware of the operation within the CIA. I think if you find her, it will lead you to the others behind this. My working theory is that China tried to manipulate the intelligence in the CIA's illicit finance group, neutralize analysts like myself so that cyber sabotage emanating from China would not be discovered. Simultaneously, they conducted a trial run of attacks against payment systems, then used the collapsing economy of Nigeria to experiment with a digital currency to replace the conventional monetary system. Even though I was suspended from the CIA, they lured me there to see if someone with my training could detect their operations. I think I got close, too close, so they tried to get rid of me, until they figured out that they could exploit something I created, the Manso Protocol. They used me to gain access to the largest RZQ wallet on the blockchain, and now it's probably in the hands of a small group of countries, but controlled, I assess, by the People's Republic of China. They've got minions. You'll find a Nassim Oyo, George Okoye, and Harold Smith, but they're probably a degree removed from Jasmine Lau. That's my analytic judgment at the moment. The two embassy officials had warmed to me. They were literally leaning in. The RSO interlaced his fingers, tilted his head, and spoke to me softly. I'm gonna make an executive decision, he said. Let's have you talk to the ambassador, the only person who is above the chief of station here. She's an honest woman, a businesswoman who made her wealth in Silicon Valley. Bill, you stay here with Lincoln. When the RSO returned, the ambassador was by his side. I replayed my story, everything from my suspension to attempts on my life in Nigeria and how the Manso Protocol could be leveraged properly to spark economic productivity. I pledged that I would give as much digital currency as was needed to stabilize U.S. markets and help the country rebuild its economic life, and then hopefully help the rest of the world. And I also thought about one specific location where we could start the rebuild in the U.S. After hearing all of what I had been through, the ambassador's face softened. Her eyes moistened. I can't believe all you've had to deal with, she said. She patted my hand that was outstretched on the table to soothe me. That day was the first sign of sympathy I had received from U.S. government personnel in ages. The ambassador gave her assurance that she would personally ensure my safe travel to Washington, and that no one else in the embassy could get in her way. She would contact the only person she was accountable to. Besides safe travel back, is there anything you want me to request from the president? She asked. I'm not looking for anything from the government, except, well, maybe an apology, I said. Something in writing, something I can show my kids. I will pass on that request, the ambassador said. She then turned to the RSO and Treasury attaché who were standing watching from behind. Let's process the paperwork immediately so we can secure his travel back home. The two men jumped to her command and did a 180 out of the room. The ambassador stood up. You must be thirsty. Is there anything I can get you? Coffee, soda? Water would be fine, I said. Coming right up. Just sit tight and I'll be back. The room seemed brighter now. On the other side of that door, I felt was vindication. I could barely believe that my ordeal was almost over, and that I would reunite with Sophia and my family. Only at that moment did I realize the weight of the stress I had been under. I began to feel the burden being lifted. The next few minutes gave me time to assess. I was no fool and was not going to hand them anything until I had a true apology in hand. There was a lot of devil in that detail, but as long as I held the private key as my carrot, I was sure we could figure out an agreeable solution. I was not a gambling man, but it seemed that this was what it must be like to hold a royal flush. The door opened. The ambassador came in with two others, a man, a woman. My bones chilled. I recognized instantly Jasmine Lau. The man I knew as well, but it took a few seconds to register. Slim, brown hair, emotionless face. It was Agent Dunn, who first informed me of my administrative leave, the man at the inception of the snowball that threw me to my deepest valley, a concave that ended up propelling me to my life's second act. Jasmine gave me a smirk, but Dunn looked at me with no recognition. The ambassador spoke up. This is Special Agent Ian Dunn and Intelligence Analyst Jasmine Han. They've been following the Code 51 crisis and would like to speak with you. Jasmine Han? Han, not Lau, I thought. Why, what are the chances? I asked sarcastically, knowing they weren't slim. My hopes unraveled. Nice to see you again, Jasmine said. She had lost her accent. Hello, Jabbari, Agent Dunn said coldly, pulling out a chair. Let's have a chat. On the other side of the table, the ambassador, Agent Dunn, and Jasmine Han perched, all staring at me, waiting for me to speak, to react. It felt like a game show, with one chance to answer $1 million question. They wanted to know how smart I was. Had I figured out their intentions? Had I put the dots together? Ian Dunn, Jasmine, the Marina Bay Sands. I had felt before they walked in that I was being kinged. Mr. Lincoln, I'll make this easy for you, Agent Dunn started. I'm informing you that due to violating U.S. Code Chapter 37, Section 792, we are authorized to take you into federal custody. I got numb. Jasmine stared at me, evaluating. She was definitely the observing officer here. Dunn continued. In addition to this warrant for your arrest, the Department of Justice is authorized by the U.S. Circuit Court of Virginia to take possession of your mobile device, its contents including the digital currency wallet, and to assert the fullest extent of judiciary power to procure the passcode for the private key. Please stand to be taken into custody. You have the right to remain silent. Dunn's words started muffling in my mind. He and Jasmine stood up, each grabbing me by an arm, pulling me vertical. I felt heavy now, yet still numb. They pinned my arms awkwardly, clasping my hands at my lower back. Cold, edgy steel wrapped my wrists. The ambassador sat ringside, her hand on her chin, tilting her face down. This is BS, I exclaimed. I would not remain silent about that. But no one reacted. The two IC officers walked me out, down the corridor, along an aisle through a maze of office cubicles filled with U.S. Foreign Service officers. They caught something they rarely would see at the embassy: a perp walk. All eyes fixed on me, each of their blinks uttering either curiosity or condemnation. Agent Dunn and Analyst Han spoke to some other officials and security guards about logistics. They were taking me to the airport. My captors brought me out of the building. The natural midday light made me wince, disorienting me psychologically more than physiologically. Minutes earlier, I thought I was en route to deliverance, but it remained out of reach. The disorientation increased after my next sighting. Standing in front of a black government-leased sedan was Chuck, my old partner at IFG. He looked serious and cold. He wore a dark suit. Dunn and Han brought me close to him. I wanted to slap the heck out of him, but my hands were cuffed and my arms held by my federal escorts. Chuck said nothing, but we had a staring contest. I decided to speak. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "It's not personal, Jabbari," he said. "Doing my duty." He then went around to the other side of the car and hopped in the back, while Dunn and Han pushed me into the back seat next to him. Just like that, I was in the clutches of presumed guilt. I had a million questions for Chuck, but couldn't pick one out of my flood of anger. Subhanallah. I leaned forward, on edge. Dunn drove while Jasmine sat shotgun. They said nothing as the car pulled out the embassy gate. "You might as well relax, Lincoln," Jasmine said. "You've got a long trip ahead." I fell back on the leather headrest, breathed deeply, and peered at the ceiling of the car. Then I closed my eyes. This nightmare had continued. All I wanted was to wake up out of it. We careened through Singapore for 10 minutes in silence. My mind drifted in the sense of defeat. Then the car stopped, but not at the airport. They drove the car into a gas station. Across the street, I noticed tall container ships dotting the waterfront view. "Don't tell me you're on E," I remarked. Dunn ignored me and went into the gas station store. Chuck just stared ahead, seeming as though he sensed my disgust. Moments later, Dunn came back holding something in his hand. He looked at Jasmine and nodded. They both reached for their mobile phones and turned them off. Chuck reached into his suit jacket, grabbed his phone, and did the same. Dunn turned to me. "Now listen carefully, Lincoln. We don't have long. When I unlock the door, you're gonna walk out, quickly go around the corner and cross the street about 100 yards. You'll see the ramp for Alma Nueva, a merchant marine ship. You are to get on, tell them that you're the new trainee." "What is this?" I asked. "You're escaping," Jasmine said. "Like Dunn said, we don't have much time. Just know this. Your analysis of the CIA breach is correct. We figured it out when we analyzed the data around the central banker murders using the link analysis tool that you designed in IFG. Chuck shared it with us." "Chuck?" I asked, looking at him, feeling I was in the midst of a whirlwind. Everything down was up. I wasn't sure what to think. "Sorry, Jabbari, that you had to go through this," he said. Then Jasmine continued. "All the technology of the Marina Bay Sands Hotel was connected to that Firewater Technologies firm you identified. We keyed in on the director, Harold Smith. He's listed as director of over 100 other firms, one of which is a holding company for an investor from Macau. That investor has other companies that have received investments from Silicon Valley venture capital firms. Some of those firms are investing in emerging markets like in Africa. Those VC firms have invested in startups that have built technology that the CIA's venture arm, In-Q-Tel, is investing in. There's a triangle of investment relationships between the US tech sector, the African tech sector, and China. They share technology, and some of the products have been adopted by CIA security. And guess which international organization is also using software from this same network? The BIS, I answered. Exactly, Jasmine said. Who else is involved? It's not purely a case of who, but of what, she said. We discovered a cyber intrusion in the Directorate of Security that spawned an artificial intelligence virus that has been operating for a long time within agency systems. The AI generates false positives in the polygraph process, not randomly, but in a smart, efficiently disruptive type of way. It was like a gambling algorithm, just like a slot machine. And so it clogs up the security clearance process and makes the Office of Security chase its tail on bunk for weeks or even months. And it distorts the agency's monitoring algorithms so that the system activity that would usually get red flagged by security goes unnoticed, at least for a while. So it was luck that you noticed? I asked. Well, not just luck, Dunn said. See, there was one odd thing that I soon came to see outside of the data. While it's a small sample size, we noticed something in common with several of the people who kept getting flagged as false positives. There's no place in your file where the government formally lists your religion, so the system wouldn't have collected that data point, but by reading the files. I noticed many of the people were highly religious. It wasn't just you, a Muslim, but Orthodox Jews, evangelical Christians, Mormons even. The one common denominator, people who might be less likely in the Chinese Communist Party's eyes to be recruited. The CCP doesn't even allow its party members to be religious. Fortunately, we eventually found someone they tried to recruit. Dunn's eyes pointed to Chuck. They tried to recruit me, Jabbari, Chuck said. It was terrible, man. I had no one to tell, not even the security folks. I felt my polygrapher was compromised. It was stressful. And it was not just a hack on their system, Jasmine explained. The insider penetration was such that we in the counterintel shops, both at FBI and CIA, did not know who to trust, even at the highest levels. It was quite possible that our own investigations were being leaked to Beijing. Nothing about this could be discussed securely, even over the intelligence community's most highly classified comm systems. We only speak in code. We don't discuss this matter on CIA channels. She paused and looked both ways as if she was under surveillance. She continued, when we do communicate, it's old school, via pen and paper. If we have to use phones, we speak in code, only to someone you trust, using references that are unique to the two of you. I'm familiar with that tradecraft, I said. But given the crisis, why hasn't this network been disrupted? This should be the number one priority. Because the intelligence community is so fractured right now, Dunn replied. There's been an effort to politicize this matter, to downplay and distort it. Some folks in high places within the agency have tried to dismiss this all as a hoax. And the whistleblower process is not working anymore. Going to congressional oversight is a non-starter. So, there are only three choices. A, go through the whistleblower process to have your cover blown and career ruined. B, leak it to the press as an anonymous source. Or C, keep pushing within the system and do what you can to keep America safe, even if it means breaking some of the rules. We're doing option C, said Jasmine. B's not an option. Even when there's a righteous leak, the media will sensationalize it, or it gets obscured through the sausage of online opinion making, doing more damage than good. It's not worth it. But we had to stop this disaster we saw happening. We saw the economy of the United States about to be choked to death, and Beijing beginning the process to steer not just the global economic agenda, but the geopolitical one. With the banking system disrupted, the US dollar and every other fiat currency has become worthless overnight. Each government responded to prevent runs on the banks, but in the process, they've shot every citizen in the foot. We can't use the money we've got. It's clear you understand how this new money system works, and we can't have you behind bars for life if we're gonna fix this collapse. It's really called the Mansa Protocol, by the way, this new system, I said. But Dunn, what made you do a 180 on me? Sophia, your wife, the therapist, Dunn replied. I perked up. See, she saw a piece we were all missing in this. Motivation. She knew something about Chuck that we overlooked. What was that? I asked, looking at Chuck. But he didn't respond, letting Dunn tell the story. His own evolution. From lapsed Catholic to flirtations with Islam, to an eventual conversion to Judaism. Apparently, he was one of Sophia's patience, although she couldn't tell me that outright. Chuck started his religious quest around the time you came under suspicion. She led me to that information, and it shed light on the timeline to focus on. The Chinese Ministry of State Security was trying to recruit him, but he didn't know who he could tell in the agency's counterintelligence shop. So he tried to sabotage their plans from the inside, and to keep his new religious faith hidden. The system was filing false and inaccurate human reports, Jabbari, Chuck said. The eyes-only ones. Anytime I saw one of those reports coming from a clearly compromised source, I deleted it. I was pained during this whole process. I knew they were going after you, but couldn't figure out a way to warn you directly. I tried to give you a clue with a fortune cookie note about your name is in Sijin. It was hell, Jabbari. Sophia's therapy is what kept me from totally falling apart back then. I used to tell her that I was hearing things, that I was getting bad suggestions to do something really bad. I couldn't tell her exactly what was going on. The Chinese intel had approached me, thinking my attitude towards my religious upbringing would be a point of commonality with them. I called them the voices. She told me not to trust bad voices, but to use my intelligence and put my trust in something with authority, something that wasn't fleeting. When I did that, my journey began, and I think the voices saw it. They left me alone, knowing I wasn't a good recruit. But I knew when you were called away for those hours with the General Counsel's office that you were in their crosshairs. Your analysis, getting close to their role in cyber sabotage, was a threat. I just couldn't warn you directly. I couldn't come clean with Sophia. Those voices also had eyes and ears throughout the agency. I assumed my phone, your phone, every form of electronic communication was compromised. I didn't even know if I could trust Dunn during his investigation. It wasn't until he came to me and inferred that your wife trusted him that I considered it. I called Sophia and asked her if it was true, and she said yes. I decided to come clean. Relief filled my thoughts, appreciating Sophia's insight, and I actually felt sympathy for Chuck. Dunn continued. Getting to the truth was a process, though. I tracked your trail, studied those closest to you and your actions. We learned about Chuck, but still needed to confirm what side you were on, Jabbari. The breakthrough started with what you did in Singapore. Your creativity saved the lives of lots of people, and your offer to help use the Mansa Protocol for good with all those funds. I'm not sure I would trust our government right now to be able to do that. This is a Flight 93 move, buddy. So when did this cyber intrusion happen into the agency? I asked. Well, a rookie counterintelligence analyst flagged it after you were placed on leave without pay, Dunn replied. I'd like to thank that rookie security officer. Where is he now? You're looking at her, Jasmine responded. So, well, tell me about what was in room 1940 in Singapore, Jasmine, I probed. Was it all surveillance or something more? In room 1940 was my partner Ian Dunn here and members of a counterintelligence task force ready to arrest you for real, she answered. For either working as part of Chinese-directed cyber sabotage, or we would have gotten you for going along with a plan to collaborate with a foreign intelligence agency, even our fake one. See, there are others we've been tracking, Jabbari, other CIA officers who we have suspected might be compromised and working on behalf of the Chinese. We did not know who to trust. We were on the fence about you, but when you didn't show up at the hotel room, we realized you weren't a traitor. Whew, thank God, I thought. But here's the thing, Dunn followed. From here on out, there is no cover, official or non-official. You're not going to be able to operate under the CIA or any other intel agency, not while the IC is so compromised. All we can do is let you go, as the best hope to keep the private key to your Mansa Protocol wallet secure. It's too valuable to be secured by our government now. So I'm on my own. I said, half asking. Yes and no, Jasmine said. There's no formal government program support for you, but there is a network out there. They will help. Help? I retorted. Help with what? To help me be a fugitive? No, this is not about you, Jabbari, Jasmine answered. It's about what you said in the embassy, about using the protocol to help. It can't happen out in the open, through the government or even commercially. There are some of us who sympathize and will assist where we can, and there are some businesses who want to help. But the power of the protocol is too heavy. It's too alluring. There has to be an underground railroad of sorts to help people where governments can't or won't. Dunn followed. Jabbari, on that ship is a contact who we are confident that you can trust. Unfortunately, we just have a single name for him, Jonah. The ship is headed on a long journey towards the Caribbean Sea. You need to get off in Central America at the port of Belize. The contact has inroads with Central American trafficking. Drugs, weapons, people, whatever is lucrative, Jasmine said. Lately it's been the sex trade. With the collapse of the economies around the world, people are trading even their own bodies. We see dark days ahead, Jabbari. It's going to take special muscle, brains, and risk-taking, and some wisdom to right the ship. And they're going to need help. We need resources, and in that environment it must be covert. You've operated on your own, covertly, for much of the past year. We know you can build a network to do that. I thought, build a network. You can take the man out of the agency, but can't take the agency out of the man. So I get on the ship, stay undiscovered, but find someone named Jonah? I mused aloud. And start making contacts in Central America? What supplies and resources do I have? The Mansa protocol is how you get the resources, Jasmine replied. All right, time to get out of here, Dunn said, glancing at his watch. He handed me my phone. You've got 60 seconds to turn the corner and get on that ship. Chuck extended his open hand. I grasped it, and we shook, and gave a half embrace. They didn't have to tell me twice. I took my phone, opened the door, and split. Scuttling away, I made a beeline towards the port. Before I reached a corner, I glanced back at the sedan and saw Dunn handcuffing Jasmine to the inside passenger door handle. He cuffed Chuck's hand to the seatbelt. He tossed the handcuffed keys out of the car. Then he slapped his own face a few times and ruffled his collar and jacket. He took out his pistol, drew it above his eyes, and whipped the butt onto the back of his own head. I could faintly hear Jasmine's voice. She feigned frantically for a passerby to contact the U.S. Embassy. I moved right around the corner. There was no turning back. Just as Dunn said, there was a pier not too far beyond the corner. Moored alongside the dock was a huge container ship. Its broadside read Alma Nueva. A muddled human queue filed on the ramp to the ship. I joined the line. Rugged men who looked like the faces of the world preceded me in various shades. African, European, Latin American. I felt as one out of many, but not really alone, even though I knew none of them. As we got up to the top of the ramp, there was what appeared to be a ship's officer checking each embarking crewman's credentials. I had no ID, and I wasn't sure how I was going to talk my way out of this one. The officer was brown, dark-skinned, but the type of phenotype that could be Indian or Fijian. I told him I was reporting to the ship for my first assignment as a new trainee. He paused for a few seconds and studied my face. Then he turned around to pick up a duffel bag, which he handed to me. "Here are your things," the officer said in a South Asian accent. I glanced at the name tag on his chest. It read, Eunice. "Go along," he said. "Enter the quarters on C deck. You'll be with the rest of the unlicensed deckhands." I had no idea what an unlicensed deckhand was, but I knew I was beginning my deep cover. The name Eunice is the name in the Quran for Jonah. I made my way below within the ship, following signs for the sea deck. At one point, I neared a noisy room. It was a mess hall. Several crew eating, playing cards, and watching TV. Still carrying my bag, I stopped at the door for a bit, surveying. As I scanned, it registered that this would be a place for gathering intel on the journey. Then, something caught my eye. A big TV screen in the hall. Only a few were watching, but the flat screen flashed some breaking news.
The World News International team has learned from sources that a former CIA officer is currently on the run. The former intelligence officer is suspected of being involved in the central banker killings and the Code 51 crisis.
Unbelievable, I thought. This would complicate matters for me. The reporter continued.
Our sources say that the former officer, a specialist in finance...
Dear God, I prayed. Please, no. Then a photo came up on the screen.
...is named George Ecoy.
It was George's smiling face.
According to a source familiar with the matter who would only speak anonymously due to the classified nature of the information, Ecoy is an MIT graduate and a naturalized U.S. citizen from Nigeria who was on non-official cover with the CIA. Most CIA personnel themselves did not know his identity. It is believed that Ecoy was the mastermind of this crisis. The CIA has learned this information through a liaison relationship with China's intelligence service. Though the two organizations are rivals, China has been cooperating with the U.S. on responding to the Code 51 crisis. Our investigative news team reached out to the CIA, FBI, and the Office of the Director for National Intelligence. Neither agency would provide comment. And in other news...
Confused, but relieved, I kept moving. George Ecoy, a non-official case officer, gone rogue? There's a wall between the non-official case officers and overt CIA staff. George had been a U.S. citizen for a few years. It was plausible that he joined the agency as a knock, and I would be unaware. But can I trust the news reports? Someone was leaking information. But was it my helpers on the inside keeping the corrupt off my track, or moles within the intelligence community trying to cover their tracks? I'm not sure it mattered at that moment. The good thing was that my name was not in the limelight. Jabbari Lincoln, publicly, was not known for anything extraordinary. But seeing that news flash made it clear that the intel leak rumor mill could be turned against me at any moment. Reporters always are interested in an intel scoop, and some are less scrupulous than others about corroborating rumors. I found my room. A small bed that pulled down from the wall took up most of the space. It was tiny. If I couldn't go and come as I pleased, you'd think it was a prison cell. But this was like prison. I had escaped, but yet was now more contained than ever, knowing my destination but with no insight about what else lay before me. I opened the duffel bag. It had clothes, about 3 days' worth, toiletries, notepads, pens, my passport, and a few books. One was the Quran. I kissed it and set it on a table. There was a green prayer rug. I started folding the bag up to put it away, and 2 envelopes fell on the floor. I picked them up to study closely. One envelope was heavy. I opened it up to find 4 passports. I scanned through the names: Sophia Lincoln, Adam Lincoln, Noor Lincoln, and Iman Lincoln. The second envelope had 1 letter. It was a government document, I could tell. The font, the texture, and as I brought it up close, I could see the CIA seal letterhead. It was from the Office of Security, addressed to me. The letter was several months old, dated around the time I briefed the Central Bank of Nigeria. I scanned it and keyed in on 1 paragraph. The Office of Security has reviewed your appeal letter. It has found that the issues raised during your security reinvestigation were not unfounded and that there were no mitigating circumstances which would prompt us to reconsider our decision. Therefore, your security clearances are hereby revoked. No further appeals will be entertained. It stung. Even though I knew the whole process was compromised, it still stung. The cosmic justice that I thought before was in reach was imaginary. There would never be an official apology. Being the CIA is never having to say you're sorry. But then I felt something else in the bag. It was the framed photo of me and my family at Great Falls. Happy and beaming we were. At least I had that still. The ship engine whirred. My room vibrated slightly. Or was it the rumble in the pit of my stomach? I put the papers next to the Quran and laid on my bed. Inside the organization I risked my life for, it seemed my name would be tainted no matter what I did from that point. My CIA legacy forever complicated, just like the intelligence community was now complicated in my eyes. All I had was my soul. I took that with me to sleep. The past fell away, and I drifted into the deep blue future.
They said he was done for. They said he was on the run for some crime. They said he committed. They said he did it. They said he was persona non grata. They said he was out yonder, beyond the call of duty. They said it was dishonor. They said it was to avoid the trauma. They said that the best in their midst was a glitch, gorilla unglued. They said a switch fell through the cracks, so they pulled it. They said it was the facts. They said it was the check that bounced back. They said it was time. He said it was a line. They said it was crosswords. They said the crossroads were fine. He said the railroads make tracks on his back. He raised up out of dodge his spine. They said he was in the wind. They said it was a cloud. They said the alibi was thin. They said pay him no mind. They said it's a chess game and the one with the most pawns wins. They said it was checkmate. They said it was ixnay. They said it was clean. He said it was a scheme. He said it was murder. They said it was suicide, open shut case. He saw 187007 cause he knew how numbers moved from 313 to MIT. They said it was like P-Rock. They said it was hard knocks. He said it was all talk. They said the letters of covert in action, but he read CYA. They said it was no play. He said no kidding. The earth was spinning and he wound up back on stage. They said it was intermission. He said it was a third act. He said it's a new mission. He said the play writes itself in intelligence. The spy game is aimed on attrition. Tunnel vision, he said he was thinking the locomotive light was blinking. He'll either get run over, forgotten, or they'll remember the name, Jabbari Lincoln.
The Jabbari Lincoln Files, Season 1, The Mansa Protocol. The Jabbari Lincoln Files is a Sine Curve Studios production. Story written and narrated by Yahya Jatta Fanusi, who also produced the sound design. The Deputy Chief of Ops is narrated by Farida Abdul Tawab Brown. The Jabbari Lincoln cover art designed by Marilyn Wu and Jasmine Manning. Sine Curve Studios would like to thank the following for constructive story feedback: Chandra Caldwell, Ross Tierney, James Brown, Farida Abdul Tawab Brown, Justin Vitfelt Matthews, Andrea Usim, Jamila Kaleri, Tam Hussein, Faisal Abdur Rahman, Imam Salim Mutman, the Babatunde Bays. For story writing consultation, Cameron Pasha, Sahir Vora. For banking and crypto consultation, Linda Jang. For media strategy, Stylist Akira's The Annie Agency, Scott Guerrero and Kathleen Chen. Intellectual property consultation by PatentInsider.co. And special thanks to you, all of the listeners who've been following this story. Watch for a new episode next Thursday and join the discussion at the Jabbari Lincoln Files Facebook page. Peace. Dear listener, Sine Curve Studios would like to let you know that there is one more transmission, or one more file, left to complete this season of the Jabbari Lincoln Files. Stay tuned for another week. But also, a special request. If you've really enjoyed this series so far, please pick one person that you think would enjoy it as well and share it with them. And also, we've started to get a presence on social media. We have a Twitter account, we have a Facebook discussion group, the Jabbari Lincoln Files page, and even an Instagram account. But maybe even more importantly is we have a blog, the Jabbari Lincoln blog. That's where you can go so that we can stay in contact with you, especially when this season ends and we want to keep you abreast of future transmissions. So go to JabbariLincoln.com, go to Facebook, go to Twitter, Instagram, and follow us there. Thank you.